Today's webinar entitled Telework Takes Flight at JetBlue Airways. My name is Jaren Hart, and I'm just going to briefly introduce the format of today's session before we get started. We're really excited to be joined by a great panel of presenters. We're excited to welcome Brian Adkins, CEO of Denison Consulting, who will be introducing our topic today and moderating the session. Next, we'll hear from Levi Nieminen, the Director of Research and Development at Denison Consulting, and Krist Wong-Yamamoto, the Acting Manager of Customer Support Communications at JetBlue. We'll plan to present for about 45 minutes and hold about 15 minutes towards the end of the presentation for a question and answer session. Throughout the presentation, if you want to submit questions to us, you can do so through the GoToMeeting widget, and you can also tweet us with your questions at Denison Culture. So let's get started. I'm happy to hand things over to Brian.
Thanks, Sharon. Earlier this year, we were conducting a webinar on the topic of trust. And as a lot of you might imagine, trust is a topic that when you work in the space of culture and leadership comes up quite often. Certainly critical to working relationships and organizations. And one of the things that we noted back at that time was that trust was at the center of some of the recent buzz regarding telework at companies such as Yahoo and Best Buy. And that got us thinking a bit more about that topic and led us to the webinar that we have today. And our goal today, really we have two goals, I think. One is to share with you some of the key insights that we at Denison have learned about this topic of telework and the relationship between culture and telework. And second, to let you hear directly from a client organization. So JetBlue is an organization that we've had a long working relationship with. It's an organization that takes their culture quite seriously, and they're very thoughtful about how they manage the culture of their organization. So we're looking forward to hearing how they have been able to leverage telework while maintaining an extremely strong corporate culture environment. But let's get started. Let's begin with Levi Nieminen. He's going to get us oriented to the telework topic, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Really appreciate it. You know, one of the things that just is really fascinating to me about this topic of telework and some of the recent news and media buzz that we've seen about this is that it really continues to be a source of debate and differing opinions, and often very strong opinions, sometimes in different directions about this topic. And, partly stemming from the popularity of telework as a work arrangement. If we look at the U.S. today, about 1 in 5 of us is engaged in regular telework, and that's a similar number to what we see worldwide today as well. There's certainly some regional variation in countries like India, as an example, where you would see more like 2 in 5 employees engaged in regular telework. But many of us have teleworked ourselves. Certainly many of us know teleworkers if we haven't. So it's a really a topic that is a good, dinner table conversation for us and a source of debate. At the same time, it's often the case that we lose sight of the fact that this has been of scientific interest and that there's a body of research growing on this topic as well. If we go back to the beginning of that work, we look at Jack Mills in 1975 coining the term telecommute. And that was really kind of the launch point of looking at this as a topic of scientific interest. And since then, certainly the research literature has really grown up around this topic quite a bit. But with that in mind, one of the things that I want to do at the outset of our session today is to ground some of the discussion that we'll have in some of the research that's been done around this topic, and then finally share some of the research that we've done at Denison looking specifically at culture and how that relates to telework outcomes. So to start out with just a quick overview of the research landscape, we can break down the work that's been done across different levels. And starting with the most simple and straightforward level, we can focus on what happens to the individual teleworker, and asking good questions like, what will happen to me if I telework? And we can also think about who in our workplace would make the best teleworkers. So we can examine that as an individual level issue. One level up from that, we can start to think about the impact of telework on relationships. And we can think about how we can support each other in those dyadic relationships to engage in effective telework. One level higher than that, where it gets interesting for the work that we do here at Denison, thinking about culture, is really taking a broader view and thinking about what happens to work groups, what happens to organizations that engage in telework, and what can organizations really do to build the right culture, perhaps, to support these teleworkers as they go out. Now, as we look at that research landscape, it's apparent that most of the research that's been done to date really lives at that first level, looking at the individual as the center point, and some research that started to branch out beyond that and consider relationships, but really not very much at the level that we'll focus on today relating to the organization and what happens to the organization as a whole. So the overview of the research that's been done, again focusing at those first two levels, is really well summarized in these 4 recent meta-analyses that have been published. For those of you maybe not familiar with the term, meta-analysis means a large, comprehensive review of all of the research that's been done on a topic to date. So very large-scale review. And the research that's been done can be boiled down into some basic pros and cons. The first set of pros here, and really the good news story about telework, is that we see increased autonomy and flexibility, which is what people report when they want to go out and engage in telework. And that's effective. People do experience that in their day-to-day as a teleworker. We also see some of the outcomes that we're hoping to prevent reduced somewhat as well in a positive direction. So work-family conflict going down, the intent to leave the job going down, and stress levels going down a little bit on average as well. However, these effects are really small in their magnitude, to the point that some researchers kind of question whether or not telework practically addresses those outcomes that it's aiming at. But nonetheless, those effects being in the right direction and statistically significant findings. On the con side, we can look at the fact that overall we don't see a change in job performance, we don't see a change in satisfaction with the job, commitment, or in career advancement. And if we look at that as a con, we might say that we would hope that telework would improve these outcomes. On the other hand, we could look at that and say that it's in some ways a bit of a wash from the view that we can allow teleworkers to go out and do this remote work without at least negatively impacting those outcomes. So it's no change. It's not a positive increase. It's not a negative decline. And then lastly, what we see is that the average hours that people work increases as they engage in telework. And that's a function of a lot of compensation behavior that needs to take place to get the work done. Okay, so the work doesn't go away, and you've got to find ways to be able to get it done. That often results in working more if part of your time is at home, where there may be different things going on. So that's the landscape, overall, if we think about what happens for the average teleworker across all the research that's been done. But what we also know is on a case-by-case basis, if we look around the room and say the likelihood of Brian being an effective teleworker versus Krist versus Levi, we know that on a case-by-case basis, it really depends quite a bit. I'll run through a set of factors that it depends on and do that pretty quickly in no particular order. But a few things you want to be thinking about. And the first is that it really starts with the supervisor that you've got. Even to be able to be allowed perhaps to engage in telework, you need that supervisor permission. And beyond that, you need the real commitment of that person to help you manage as a teleworker as opposed to being physically co-located. It also depends quite a bit on the technology and the tools that maintain the interconnectedness of those virtual workers with the traditional office. It's really easy to forget that one as we get excited about organizational psychology and all of the things that we're really passionate about. But at the core, it really is a telecom issue. It really is a technology issue as well. So an important factor not to forget about. The home environment that people work from, and home is still the most common place for telework, really matters quite a bit. There's been a good amount of research done on this topic, some really quite specific.
getting down to the level of whether or not you've got a door on your home office that closes. Okay, so you need to have the ability, you know, when this guy wakes up and starts barking and running around, to separate yourself from him at different times. And then lastly, it's important to remember that telework is really a different animal when we're talking about different frequencies or different extent of telework. So are we talking about, on the low end, a half day every other week? On the high end, you know, permanent telework, being permanently away from the physical workplace. And what we tend to find in general, and there's some new and emerging research that shows this, is that the psychological outcomes that people experience as they telework has a curvilinear relationship with that frequency, where there's a sweet spot that occurs somewhere around perhaps 1 to 2 days every week as a teleworker. So in that moderate range of having some ability to use telework, but not going towards the max end of the scale. All of those factors really important. To get into the meat of the discussion that we want to focus on here, the question is, should culture be added to that list? Should we view culture as being equally important as the home environment, the technology, the supervisor, whether the dog is barking, whether the kids are crying, etc.? And that's where the rest of the, today's session will really focus. And the most basic question you can ask as you think about this is really, why should we consider telework a cultural issue? Is it a cultural thing to think about? The first answer to that is that we can't forget that these individuals that go out and work remotely as individuals are still interconnected with a group. They're still interconnected with an organization. And not only the interconnection between them and the organization, but also what's happening in the organization itself, in the office location, influences the dynamics that underlie telework. So that group performance, group dynamic issue becomes very important, although sometimes a little bit harder to get a view of than some of the other factors that we mentioned. Often it also requires quite a change in the fundamental beliefs and assumptions, the mindsets that people carry about what work means, about where work should be done. The most fundamental dynamic that gets talked about quite a bit is the shift in mindset from managing towards the process of work, which means understanding what happens from point A to point Z to get work done and focusing management there, versus managing towards the results of that work. So really focusing on what happens at the back end of that process and viewing work through that results-oriented lens. And in many companies, that can be quite a cultural shift in order to really make that move. Lastly, it's incredibly important to remember that these are not just programs that are introduced. It's also about how people understand those policies. We can introduce a program to an organization and find that very few people actually take advantage of that program, because the word on the street, so to speak, is that you don't want to be the person that goes out and teleworks. Yeah, we have the program, but we don't really see people taking advantage of it. So it's really about a perceptions issue as well as about being an issue of policies. So beyond the question of, is telework a cultural issue, we want to start to understand what specific facets of culture really play a role. And as an organization thinking about supporting this type of work, we want to know, what does a telework conducive culture look like? The lens that we take to understand culture at Denison, starting from the research that Dan Denison started about 30 years ago, thinking through the characteristics of organizational culture that relate most closely to effectiveness and business performance, is visualized and shown here in this circumflex model. And the model organizes those characteristics that relate closely to effectiveness in terms of 4 traits, each of the traits corresponding to the primary colors shown in the model. And then below that level, in terms of the 12 facets, or as we refer to them, indexes, that make up those 4 primary traits. And to give you just a general grounding in what the traits of this model mean and how we'll relate that to the research that I'll show in the coming slides, I'll give you just a quick run around the model, focusing on the question that each of these traits addresses. So the main question, if we start with involvement, we're really talking about whether or not our people are engaged and working together. With adaptability, we're asking the question, is the organization, is the culture listening to what happens outside the organization's walls. Do we know what's going on with customers, competitors, and market? With mission, we're talking about understanding the direction of the company. Do we have a strategy that people are connected to, goals and objectives that drive the day-to-day, and that vision that becomes a compelling case for where we're headed into the future? And finally, the last trait, consistency, really focuses on whether or not the system as a whole is aligned and coordinated, and whether the people are aligned and coordinated to produce reliable results over time. So this will be the model that grounds the research that I'll present. The study that we did that I'll show some highlights on really focused on two main questions. The first question was whether or not the culture traits in that model relate to or predict what happens with work units when those work units have teleworkers in them. So what is the consequence of building those cultural elements on the performance of work groups with teleworkers? The second question is, beyond understanding whether or not culture has an effect, which of those traits have the biggest effect? Because as a practitioner, we want to think about what should we focus on? What are the elements of our culture that we want to perhaps intervene on in order to provide the best likelihood of having effective telework in the organization? So those are the two questions we're aiming at with this study. The 30,000-foot view of the study itself, just so you have an idea of what we did in this, was using a sample from a large government agency in the U.S., all of the survey data for this study being collected in 2012, a really large, robust sample that we had, kind of a research dream sample, with over 300 groups, over 11,000 individuals in total that we were analyzing. If we look at the average size of the work groups that we were analyzing, they were a mix of teleworkers and office employees, about 16 teleworkers and about 13 office employees on average. We assessed the culture of those plus 300 work groups using the culture survey, the Denison Organizational Culture Survey that I showed the model for, and then we supplemented with some additional questions that related to telework. So some questions about the impact that telework is having on those work units' performance, as rated by the supervisors of that work unit, and then also ask some questions about the degree to which people think that the supervisor in the work group supports the use of telework, and then finally employees' attitudes about telework. Do people hold positive or negative attitudes about the use of telework and its effect? So to go back to the first question we asked here, and to cut pretty quickly to the punchline, the answer is yes. The culture traits in the model did predict with statistically significant results what happened in those business units in terms of the impact of that telework on performance. And the nature of that relationship, as you can see in the visual there, is that as you increase the degree to which the values, behavioral norms, and mindsets corresponding to each of those culture traits is shown in the workplace, in those work groups, there's a positive increase on the performance of those groups as a result of the telework. So more of the culture traits predicting more and higher levels of performance. And the really impressive thing about this was that the culture of those work groups predicted the outcome even after controlling for some other things that matter quite a bit. Okay? And the other things that matter being supervisor support, so whether or not your supervisor fundamentally supports you to use telework, and then finally how positive or negative people in the work group view the use of telework. And as you think about that, it really means two things. First of all, it means that the group culture that you have carries a unique and important effect on the performance outcomes of your group. And secondly, that you really need all three of those elements to move towards the ideal in this, which I think for most of us, for most practitioners managing this, is really seamless performance. You want to have telework have a seamless effect on the performance of those work groups, and if anything, enhance the performance of those groups. So all three elements in combination being really critical. The second question we went after, again, is helping to prioritize those effects and understand if we're going to choose to do some culture work to try to have an impact on these telework outcomes, where do we focus? where do we stick the crowbar, where do we focus the effort and the action that we're going to be taking. And you may have formed a hypothesis in your head for what you think this ought to be. For us, the results made quite a bit of sense in this one. And the trait that popped out as being most important was consistency, the consistency element. And if you think about this, individual teleworker out working remotely, but needing to stay connected, coordinated, and aligned with the organization, with the systems of the organization, this consistency trait really makes a lot of sense. You need to have those strong values, norms, and mindsets that aligns the people in your work groups, aligns the people in your organization, to the extent that people can still go out and telework remotely and still keep that interconnectedness, because the norms and values really support that and focus on that and emphasize that. And if we drill that down just a little bit to give you a flavor of what you might think about doing within each of those, and this will be, the segue point to the next part of the talk. We can think about the first element here being coordination and integration, which really has to do with the alignment of the people in the work group, the alignment of the people with the system that manages that work group's behavior and that work group's performance. And here you can think about the effects of communication being critically important. When we think about work groups and we think about all the diversity in work groups, be it functional diversity, ethnic, geographical diversity, all of the forms of diversity that people bring to the work group, that's important in any context, but in a telework context, it becomes even that much more important that communication is able to bring some of those challenges together, that it's able to overcome some of those difficulties created by some of those forms of diversity. The next element here that we're looking at, agreement, really focuses on how people are able to handle and overcome conflict in work groups. Are we able to get agreement on difficult issues, the difficult issues that matter? And with this one, you can think about the issue, the idea of crucial conversations and honest conversations being really, really fundamentally important in all contexts, but in the context of telework, being even that much more critical, because much of the context of that interpersonal communication can be challenged, can be lost when we're working with someone remotely through telework. So being very explicit, being very honest, being very clear in those types of interactions becomes critically important. You can think about that as really needing to foster that honesty, that candid feedback that we need to give each other in the workplace. And the last one is where I'll really hand this over to Krist. For Denison, for the Denison model, core values means knowing who we are, knowing who the organization is, and living that out in a daily basis, right? Not just on the posters in the wall, but really in the norms and the values that guide our daily behavior. And I know that we've got a great case study through JetBlue to really speak to how, in particular, they've been able to build the set of core values that can guide teleworkers and sustain that interconnectedness and consistency. So with that, I think I'll pass the baton to Krist for the next section of this.
Thank you so much, Brian and Levi. So as Levi mentioned, core values, agreement and coordination and integration are the cultural traits that matter most in a telework model. So I'm going to really be spending most of my time discussing how JetBlue supports these culture traits and how it works for us at JetBlue from the perspective of customer support, which is our home-based workforce, which is based in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm not going to go too much into the statistical and technical aspects of it, but really focusing on these three cultural traits. So first one I wanted to touch upon was core values. As Levi discussed, core values is really a high-performing organizations have a clear set of core values that help employees and leaders make consistent decisions and behave in a consistent manner. So the JetBlue values for us are the foundation for our culture and are really the tools that we use to make all of our decisions. Crew members are asked and expected to live and work according to these values, and they not only differentiate us from the competition, but also results in superior customer and crew member experiences. So I'm going to go through our 5 values and speak a little bit to them and how they build this foundation of our culture. So our first value is safety. It always comes first, naturally being an airline. Perception is a reality, and information is key to risk management, and safety is never compromised in decision making. Our second value is caring. Respect and understanding are the hallmarks of who we are. Caring is what brings the JetBlue experience to life, which I'll talk to in a few slides. Caring respects diversity in customers and crew members, responds to challenges, and is really service recovery in a pressure situation. Our third value is integrity. Truth, honesty, and doing what's right. It's really the only way to do business, so we communicate openly and honestly, internally and externally. That's how we earn trust from each other and our customers, and it also means transparency in business, both internally and externally. Our fourth value is passion. JetBlue is really more than just an airline. We deliver a great experience and an excellent product with dedication and enthusiasm, and that's truly what keeps our customers coming back. It's bringing energy to every task, taking a creative approach to solve challenges, and doing the right thing, not the convenient thing. Above all, passion is something that cannot be learned or taught, and it's part of who we are as crew members, and it's really in our DNA at JetBlue. And finally, fun. Work should be a friendly, satisfying, enjoyable environment, a place that you like. We really promote an enthusiastic and upbeat environment that is open, rewarding, positive, and full of good people. Fun is also about making people's day for yourself, for each other, and for our customers. And really the equation is simple when you think about it. We enjoy our jobs and our customers enjoy the JetBlue experience. Our CEO, Dave Barger, said recently in a leadership conference for us he said, live the values, hold yourself accountable to them, and hold others accountable too. So turning back to our history, since our first revenue flight took off from Fort Lauderdale in 2000, so 13 years ago, we have worked day in and day out to revolutionize the aviation industry with a commitment to bringing humanity back to air travel. And this really is kind of our, based from our inception. There was a clear lack of this humanity in the industry. It was a very impersonal, oftentimes a very stressful experience when it came to air travel. And so we really took this approach, which was completely different at the time, to bring humanity back to air travel. So today, 13 years later, our mission has evolved, and we are now here to inspire humanity. We believe that every person at JetBlue has the responsibility to participate in our success, and our culture is the result of each and every crew member's actions and attitudes and commitment to the JetBlue values and inspiring humanity in all that we do. So who are we really? When asked what kind of company we are, our CEO Dave Barger once said, we are a customer service company that happens to fly planes. Truly our focus is to provide excellent award-winning customer service by delivering the JetBlue experience each and every day, on every flight, with every customer, and on every phone call, with the knowledge that the values are the foundation for our actions. When asked what we look for in our crew members, our Vice President of Customer Support, Frankie Littleford, said, we hire for the attitude and train for the aptitude. The philosophy behind this is that you can teach people really how to perform a task or do a transaction, or just do type of a transactional, take a phone call, book a reservation, but you really can't teach people how to be nice or how to be genuine. That's something that comes from within. It's part of who you are, and that's something we've really tried to infuse into, like I said, our DNA here at JetBlue. So now when I say award-winning customer service, we're not kidding. Service truly does matter. In fact, in May of this year, we earned our 9th consecutive honor for J.D. Power and Associates for highest customer satisfaction. And this is unprecedented in the airline industry and really truly reinforces the commitment and dedication our crew members have to our mission to inspire humanity and live the JetBlue values. So I'm now going to focus on the second and third cultural traits of agreement and coordination and integration. And as Levi explained, agreement means that by engaging in dialogue and getting multiple perspectives on the table, people can reach agreement when difficult issues and problems arise. Coordination and integration essentially means that employees understand how the work that they do impacts others and how others' work impacts them. They make sure that work is coordinated and integrated to serve the organization as a whole. So at JetBlue, our leadership style is based on 5 principles of leadership. And these principles foster agreement, unity, agreement and unity through transparency and collaboration. So I'm going to go through these 5 principles. So the first one is treat your people right. You want to empower crew members. Here at JetBlue, we have various initiatives. One here in customer support, for example, is called the Blue Hero, where crew members are empowered to make decisions in situations that fall outside of the norm, outside of the normal policy and guidelines, such as waiving fees or making exceptions. And they're really given that empowerment to make that decision if they feel that it's the right thing to do. The second principles of leadership is to do the right thing. Truly what this means is to act in a manner that supports the JetBlue values. Do the right thing, don't just do things right, and also resolve conflicts and reconcile differences and lead across boundaries to get that sense of unity and support. Third is communicate with your team. We encourage healthy, open, and candid dialogue between crew leaders and crew members, transparency, and to reinforce the importance of preserving a direct relationship within our culture. Fourth is encourage initiative and innovation. We want our crew members to challenge the way things have always been done and look for a better way. One example is in one of our support teams. It's called Think Tank, and it's just an open forum where crew members can submit any types of ideas, concepts, suggestions on ways that they think can make life at JetBlue better or improve on a process or cut down, improve efficiencies and so forth. Lastly, inspire greatness in others is the 5th principles of leadership. We encourage our crew members and our leaders to compliment, encourage, praise, and thank each other. Lead by example and practice service leadership is key to inspiring greatness in others. We also have several different types of recognition programs in our company that is crucial to maintaining that level of engagement and sense of culture. One of which is our LIFT program. It's an online recognition program to send thanks via electronics. They're e-thanks to peers and colleagues, and crew leaders can also award gift cards to crew members. Likewise, crew members can see who's being given a lift, who's been complimented, and what it does is it just kind of helps to inspire others to do the same. And another one that we have here in customer support is called the Above and Beyond program. This recognition program recognizes crew member excellence for going above and beyond their required performance expectations. So as I mentioned earlier, we rely heavily on the feedback received from our crew members, particularly one which I'm going to spend a little time in talking about, is our crew member speak-up survey. Now, this annual survey is specifically designed to be a more in-depth measure of crew member engagement at work. So in essence, by measuring engagement, we're determining the extent to which crew members commit to someone or something in their organization. This level of commitment is reflected in how willing crew members are to go above and beyond and how much they like the jobs they are doing. In other words, the survey is really looking to answer the question, when you get up in the morning, are you excited to go to work? We firmly believe that our crew members deserve to have colleagues who are engaged, active citizens of JetBlue. And here in customer support, we're proud to say we have a 92 engagement score when it comes to crew member engagement. So really, what does this 92% mean besides having happy crew members? Well, for one, we found that crew member engagement translates directly into customer satisfaction. We've also found that our crew members feel that they have a better quality of life, a better work-life balance, higher satisfaction ratings in terms of work and workplace, which results in higher productivity and morale, more so than a traditional office model. So the million-dollar question, how do we make it work here at JetBlue? So of the 15,000 JetBlue crew members across the network, 2,000 crew members comprise customer support, which is our telework home-based workforce based here in Salt Lake City, Utah. The majority of our frontline reservations and support crew members work 100% from home. This type of telework environment presents unique challenges and opportunities when it comes to maintaining consistency within our culture. So how do we make it work? We really do it by focusing on three key things. First is effective communication. Second is promoting a sense of community amongst our crew members. And third, encouraging crew members to be active citizens of JetBlue. So focusing on communication, I'm going to touch on a few ways that we use within customer support and JetBlue to maintain this very vital link to keeping our crew members engaged. The first one is we have what's called our Customer Support Values Committee, and each of all of our other operational divisions have their own values committees as well. So this includes in-flight, flight operations, sysops, etc. So our values committee is the first line of contact that crew members have to communicate with leadership on all aspects of life at JetBlue. This includes issues such as training, compensation, schedules, or overall quality of life. And it really helps to support that direct relationship between crew leaders and crew members. Another one is, as I mentioned earlier, is our annual speak-up survey, and we also do yearly anniversary surveys for our crew members. The feedback received from them is extremely valued and appreciated, and our leadership really is fully committed to listen to what our crew members have to say, respond to their concerns, and action those solutions that will improve the quality of life at JetBlue. Pocket sessions and TLC visits, and also our annual State of the Airline address. Our executive leadership team frequently and regularly makes in-person on-site visits where crew members, our at-home crew members, are invited to actually come into the center or attend via live webcast to keep abreast and informed and engaged on the state of the industry, JetBlue-specific information such as corporate and division initiatives and goals, as well as the business of the business. Naturally, in this day and age, email communication from leadership is a big way we communicate here at JetBlue. On a corporate level, we have Jet to the Point, which is the communication from our CEO, Dave Barger, where he talks about our business goals, strategy, and his thoughts on the industry. We also have work group, and on the work group and team level, various types of daily and weekly and monthly communications that come from our various leadership levels to keep our crew members current and informed. We also require our crew members to attend regular meetings, trainings, and have phone contact with their leaders. Crew members attend regular monthly and quarterly meetings and training sessions, both individually, such as one-on-ones, as well as collectively with their teams. Supervisors are also required to regularly contact their team members by phone just to keep in touch with them. Our JetBlue Internet resources is another way we communicate with our crew members. We have a corporate Hello JetBlue intranet site. We also have our workplace site for customer support called the Customer Support Buzz, which I'll show a little bit more later in my presentation. Also, team sites have their own sites, and we also have a internal knowledge base called Ask Blue, which is the repository for policies, procedures, and processes that crew members can instantly access whenever they are assisting customers. Finally, social media. A lot of our teams on a team level will utilize things, various social media tools like Yammer or Facebook and Twitter to keep abreast of what's current, what's happening, with their team, as well as what's going on with our company. Because we are a 24/7 operation, this type of communication helps them to kind of know at a glance what's happened since the last time they've worked. So some examples of how we promote community and citizenship include things like JetBlue activities and events. And these are just some examples of, for example, we had our summer party just last weekend at a water park here in Salt Lake City, where crew members can bring their family and friends and enjoy each other's company, have a great day at the water park. We also do a trunk or treat every Halloween. We have a spring carnival at a park here in Salt Lake, and we also do things like exclusive movie premieres, where we will buy out a whole theater or several theaters, and it's an exclusive JetBlue event. Also partnerships with business partners such as Universal Studios. This is an example of one of the minions from Despicable Me that came to our carnival. And we also have a health challenge every year to encourage healthy lifestyle and well-being. And another partnership that we have is that we are our sponsorship of the Salt Lake Real, which is our local professional soccer team. When it comes to charitable community and citizenship, we really promote charitable and community involvement. Such things as volunteering, fundraising, support of various charitable organizations like the Ronald McDonald House, Susan's E. Komen. Most recently, this is a picture of our leadership conference here in Salt Lake, where we assembled, they're called sweet cases, and these were then donated to the Utah Foster Care Foundation to give to children in the foster care system. And these are just a few of the types of charitable and community events that we participate in. Corporately, we also have a program called, where it's called JetBlue Community Connection, and the Volunteer Travel Certificates program gives crew members who volunteer a minimum of 25 hours in a calendar year with a nonprofit organization the opportunity to provide grants and round-trip flights to the nonprofit organizations that they support. Internally, we also encourage our crew members to donate to the JetBlue Crew Member Crisis Fund through automatic tax-deductible payroll deductions. And this nonprofit fund was created to assist crew members and their immediate family members in times of crisis. Most recently, the Hurricane Sandy, which impacted many of our crew members back east. Finally, another way that we promote community and citizenship is through a virtual community. By providing this virtual community for our crew members, they are able to stay connected and engaged in a fun way. Some examples of this include our Customer Support Buzz page, which is our intranet page that I mentioned earlier. Here we have things like online forums and online communities, And we also have regular fun contests. This is one where this crew member, we ambushed her, said she was coming in for a one-on-one with her supervisor, and we ambushed her with a getaways package to Bermuda. We also do things like Buzz Eats. This is a cooking show where crew members who really have a passion for cooking can show us things that they enjoy making or talents that they have. That was a crew member that made empanadas, and this is another crew member that we have that has shared their family's homemade pizza recipe. We also have a video series called SSC Cribs, which is kind of a spin-off of the MTV Cribs concept, kind of a fun idea. Here we actually went into crew members' homes to have them really show their personality and what they're passionate about. This actually, for example, this is actually my home office here. I'm quite passionate about Hello Kitty, obviously. Another one was another crew member who had all of this JetBlue memorabilia, or another one had a New York themed office. We also have a crew member here who, her office, she's a Harley Davidson enthusiast, and so her office is all decked out in Harley Davidson theme. So just some of the fun ways that we help to keep our crew members engaged and maintaining that culture in a fun, energetic way. So in closing, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. So at JetBlue, truly, our culture really is more than the products we offer our customers. It really is our crew members. And with that, I like to thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Excellent, thanks, Chris. I think it's really clear that the crew members, regardless of their working arrangement, feel very involved. They have a voice in the organization. They feel a strong sense of personal connection to the JetBlue organization, and we very much appreciate your taking some time to share not just that connection or helping us feel that connection, but actually sharing some of the specific practices and tools that you use to help create that. So I think with the remaining time that we have, it would be great if we could address some of the questions that people have been sending in to us while Levi and Chris were talking. So I'm going to ask Jaren to share some of those questions and see if we can offer some more insight.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Chris and Levi. Let's just go ahead and get started with some of our questions. We'll start off with one from Sean, and this one is for you, Chris. Sean's question is, was the decision to implement telework more of a recruiting or retention matter, or a hard number business case benefit to the company?
Let me give you a little background about how we started. So we, as far as our customer support division here, we actually started off from day one with this telework model. And it was based on our original founder, David Nieminen, had started up another company here in Salt Lake, another airline called Morris Air, which they had implemented this telework model on a smaller scale. It was approximately about 500 crew members that they had in their call center in telework environment. So when he decided to start up JetBlue 14 years ago, we really went with this from day one. So it wasn't so much, I don't want to say that it was one or the other, but I think because they had that success with it, they really wanted to keep that model going. So from that perspective, it really, obviously there are things like, cost savings, overhead, that type of thing that we save on that. So I want to say maybe it's probably a combination of both. We have a little more retention with that. We're able to attract a higher caliber of crew member because of the attractiveness of that telework model. So, a little bit of both.
Thanks, Chris. We have another question for you. This one was submitted by Tom. And he asks, how do you recruit for your telework workforce?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. We actually, we pretty much virtually our entire recruiting is through word of mouth. And we don't post on job boards, we don't do email blasts, we don't do print advertising, anything like that. It really is through word of mouth from our crew members here because they are so passionate about the culture and the success of what they like about being able to work at home, some of the work-life balance, the benefits of, for example, being able to work in your pajamas, things like that, not having to have a commute. And we recruit several times a year depending on our staffing levels. And all we do is we post it on our JetBlue.com work here site. We have the posting open. Sometimes it's only for a few hours because we literally receive thousands upon thousands of applicants for what can be about 60 to 70 position openings that we're recruiting for at that time. Sometimes it will even crash our website because we get so many people trying to apply for those positions. So.
Thanks, Krist. We're going to ask a couple of questions to you, Levi. Russell has asked, from the government study, were you able to determine which traits had a negative relationship on teleworker performance?
A really good question. And with that one, what we found was that each of the 4 traits in the model contributed positively to the performance outcomes of these work groups. There were no traits that had a negative relationship, meaning you would want less of those norms and values embedded within the work group. Each of the components of the model contributed to the outcome of those groups. The trait that contributed the most, the one that stood out, pardon the use, consistently, was the consistency trait. And so that's where we focused and highlighted some of the things that you might want to think about with that, and certainly some of the things that JetBlue has been doing really well to foster that culture in their organization. But really good question, and you wouldn't want to take that result to mean that you don't, at the same time, need a very clear and strong mission that guides people's direction, that you need those work groups to understand forces beyond themselves, right? What's happening outside of the organizational walls, the customer that they're serving, the marketplace, and the environment that they're operating in. And that you also would want them to be highly engaged, working with each other effectively, and getting the development, professional, personal development that they need to progress in their career. So you need all those elements, but if you've got to focus on one to bite off and chew first, the research would suggest consistency.
Great. Thanks, Levi. Great question, Russell. Levi, we have another question for you. This one's from Emily. Emily asks, how do generational issues in the workplace potentially impact work group culture and telework outcomes?
Yeah, really great question, and we've had some interesting discussions about this one recently as generations becomes a more prevalent, a more visible issue in organizations and coming into awareness. I think just to reflect on an answer, one answer to that question, reflecting on the research literature on this, there is some interesting work that's been done looking at the types of organizational cultures that different generations prefer, and some work suggesting, in particular, the younger generations prefer cultures that have more teaming components to them, using teamwork as a way to organize the work that gets done, as well as higher expectations around the frequency and the type of feedback and communication that they receive peer-to-peer that they look for from their supervisors. So there are generational differences in the cultures that are preferred. There's also research focusing on whether or not employees from different generations are more or less effective as teleworkers, because we might think, as this research hypothesized, that we would see that younger generations would perhaps be more effective, perhaps more comfortable with the technology, which is often the case. But that work at this point is really mixed. There's not a clear result in there that bears that hypothesis out. Now, the one thing that we do see as a difference is that younger generations have a much stronger expectation about the use of telework. Going back to some of the things we talked about in my section of the presentation, the idea of needing perhaps a culture shift for many organizations to support the move to telework. When you think about some of the younger generations, perhaps there's much less of a shift that's needed because they've just grown up in an era where where telecom was everywhere, the era of iPads, iPhones, and Wi-Fi, etc. So there perhaps is just more of an expectation that people will telework, that they will have access to those programs, and may not view it as much of a shift from the norm or from the way things certainly were even 10, 15 years ago.
Great, thanks, Levi. I think we have time for at least one more question. And Krist, this one is for you from Sean. He asks, what performance measures are being monitored to ensure levels of service to customers are not adversely impacted?
That's a great question. We actually have, because of the fact that they obviously are a remote workforce, we have very, very specific guidelines and requirements that they must follow, essentially. So from attendance to performance metrics and stats that they are required to meet. Our supervisors regularly monitor the crew members, anywhere from, again, their metrics and stats to actually live and recorded call monitors where they're listening in. We also do things like peer mentoring when crew members need, there's some areas of opportunity for them to improve on the service. So it's a points-based system. So depending on how many points they accrue because of tardies or things called audit issues, which are things where they maybe didn't do a process correctly or handle the situation in the best way, they're accrued attendance points, and it just depends on how, what level of points they have. But we do have specific thresholds on, when they can actually get put on probation, progressive guidance, and so forth, up to, and it can actually lead to termination. So very, very, clear and straightforward guidelines that's covered from day one in training, and it's also available for crew members to access anytime via our intranet.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. And I also want to thank Levi as well for all the great insights and responses to those questions. As we wrap up today, I was really struck, Chris, by your comments about one of the core tenets at JetBlue being that we are piloted by people and not policy. I thought that was a good connection to the point that Levi made earlier too, where sometimes when you get into the telework discussion, this debate between policy versus mindset. And certainly policy, it's good to know who's eligible, what the boundaries are regarding telework in organizations. But I think that mindset work piece is real critical. And our beliefs about how work gets done, where it gets work done, plays just a real important role in the ultimate viability of a telework program in any organization. So thanks again to both of you for your insights and participation today, and thanks to all of you who joined us. We really appreciate your curiosity about the topic, and we will look forward to any additional questions. We will archive this webinar so that other people can check it out, or you can revisit it later if you'd like. And we look forward to having you join us in the future. Thanks again, and have a great day.